And we are live. Well, we're not live. We're recording. I'm Dan Pritz.
I am Matt Heelan. It is July 31st.
Nice.
Yeah. It's first in-person, in-studio, Matt Heelan. The other three, I was at home.
Yeah, we were recording over Zoom.
Yeah.
Zoom has reduced the resolution that they provide in their recordings since the beginning of COVID timber. That's what I'm calling it, COVID timber.
Oh, okay. Why are you calling it COVID timber?
Because it's a new season. I think it'll be COVID 2020 or COVID 20 before long. Right? It's a new season, new germ.
Yeah.
We are also recording with our new cameras today instead of on Zoom. So hopefully that will come together well.
Yeah.
These are recording in high def, and they take about a gig a minute.
Wow. So by the time we're done.
Yeah, it will have filled up the 240 gigabytes in each of them.
Mm.
And then we're going to have to get somebody to put those together.
That, right. Well.
So what do you want to talk about today, Matt?
Well, I did want to, this wasn't on our list, but I did want to talk about just, I did not have a chance to actually watch the hearings with all the tech executives yesterday. I was on the way in and I was listening to just some snippets of it. And it's not surprising to me, but the fact that there was a revelation by Jeff Bezos that said basically all the Alexas that are made, he knows he's building them to lose money. He knows he's going to lose money on them. So basically, they accuse him basically of dumping, right? That he's just dumping that into the marketplace, knowing that they're going to lose money just simply to, earn revenue in a different way, right?
Right, but that has been his kind of business model.
It has
the entire time,
right? That's been a successful strategy for him. So, and then the other part that I think that a lot of people in the press have talked about is just what technology companies they really think need to be broken up. And
true,
I know that there's been a big effort to say that Amazon's Web Services is by itself one of the most profitable, most revenue generating company within a company.
Also, if you've been asleep for the last couple of weeks, for our listeners that don't know it, all the tech giants talked to Congress yesterday. I guess Jeff Bezos,
Zuckerberg.
Tim Cook. Who else?
Sindhu Pichai from Google. And
I heard that it was quite, that it was a little bit of animos in the room. Like there were some upset people.
Yeah, they mentioned that, and I'm not, I listen to those things or read about those things, not from a political perspective, even though obviously they are, but more from a business kind of perspective. Like how are you going to deal with regulations and of companies of that size and of that influence? But yeah, the news story was that a lot of the conservatives were focused on the free speech side of things and saying that they're restricting conservative voices somehow because the implication is that a lot of technology companies are more liberal biased, right, than conservative biased, maybe. I don't
know. Maybe the conservatives are better at using social media,
right?
But I think there needs to be some kind of way of inhibiting what goes on social media. And I don't think it should be governed by the platform itself. The platform should govern itself so that it makes money. But the government should step in, or people should step in and govern it with respect to the algorithms that feed us our data. Because social media all over the place, the artificial intelligent algorithms that run them are making drones of us, right? If we claim interest in something, then pretty soon that's all we're going to see, right? We're going to feed our own view of the world, and it will become our reality, whether it's true or not.
Right. Well, I think of the example that I've read about, which is that remember back when I don't know. Hopefully, our listeners won't be too old, but that back when they broke up Ma Bell.
What's wrong with the listeners that are old?
No. I'm just saying what I'm getting is I'm making a reference to something that's fairly old. So
showing your age.
Yeah, they broke up Ma Bell years and years ago, and what happened was I can't remember all the companies that came out of the breakup, but there were a lot of really Bell Laboratories came out of that. A bunch of other companies. After they broke them up, all this innovation happened. And what a lot of the regulators claim is that if you break up Amazon or a Facebook or somebody of that size, it's going to unleash all this innovation that's going to happen. Whereas some of the companies like Google say, well, we're already really good at innovation, right? You don't need to break us up, right? So it's just it's interesting how much potential could be there for innovation.
Clearly, plenty of potential for innovation. Will they innovate? Right. I think what caused the innovation with respect to breaking up AT&T or Ma Bell was the fact that they completely separated the business interests. Right. They didn't have this overarching company that could say, okay, we need to twist that lever this way and this one that way, because that's where we were getting hurt with respect to not having competition in that area. And now we've got too much competition, and you don't know who you can trust or who you can't, right? If who has their own network, for instance, in the phone industry, wireless?
I don't know why.
Well, it makes a difference, right? Because a lot of companies are using AT&T's network.
Right.
I think AT&T has a network, Verizon has a network, and Sprint has a network.
Right.
Or whoever Sprint is now.
T-Mobile.
Right. But everybody else, all these other Cricket, all those other ones, they're just piggybacking on top of it and getting, being able to charge lesser amounts, even though it's, it's the networks that exist that are paying for that. But that was the anti-monopoly move.
Right. Well, what they said was that the sort of highlight out of the hearings was that in so many words that they got Zuckerberg to admit that they purchased Instagram mainly just to get into that specific area and quash everybody else, basically.
So, but what's wrong with that?
Right.
I mean, did they point that out? Yes. If they have a competitor who's going to come in, then they have the money, they're going to buy them.
Right.
Where doesn't that make sense? I mean, to me, that's just capitalism.
Sure. I guess from a regulator's perspective, they look at it from a monopoly perspective, right?
But what are they monopolizing?
Right.
Our attention? Right. Well, I think that might be something we should legislate, that they can't draw our attention like that. That's, I don't know if we can even.
The way they look at it is
it's hypnotic,
Sure. But the way they look at it is monopoly in terms of they control a specific industry. And it doesn't
they created the industry, right? The Google search industry, right? Or the search industry was created by Google. And yes, they own a monopoly on it. Facebook, right? They don't have monopoly. I think MySpace is still alive.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it. I mean, on one point, I love capitalism. On the other side of it, I also think that, and especially if you're us, right, you're like a small company, and let's say we wanted to build a Facebook competitor, right? The likelihood that our small company is going to be able to succeed at that is pretty challenging, because if we got really good at it, they just come in and offer us a bunch of money and say go away.
But that's a lot of companies are building their company based on that model.
Oh, sure.
Build it, sell it, exit.
Sure.
And do it again. Because we count on the Facebooks and the Googles out there and Adobe to buy up our product if we can make it good enough for them to be threatened to buy it.
I think of DuckDuckGo. Have you ever used it?
Yeah. I uninstalled it. I mean, I liked it, but
I've never.
I felt like they were just a little bit invasive into their protecting me.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Really? Interesting.
So, I mean, I did not install it all at once. First, I said, okay, stop doing that so much. And then I said, okay, stop doing it until I tell you to. And then I said, okay, just stop.
Just right. Right. So I don't know. I guess not to get too like history on you, but you know, I mean, I just go back to think about things like the railroad and other utilities, right? That were you know, where it's in our history where they had this sort of market dominance, right? And just crowded out the competition and the ability for smaller, medium-sized companies to compete in those spaces. I think that's a dangerous thing, and in some degree is anti-competitive and kind of thwarts entrepreneurship in some ways.
I don't disagree. I really don't. I guess the point I was trying to make is that when you sell bread, for instance, and you have a product, a commodity, and you are the only people that sell bread and people have to eat bread, that's a monopoly. But when you have an idea and everybody likes your idea, so everybody buys your idea, that doesn't seem so much like a monopoly, even though it is the same thing.
Right.
It's just that you don't need the idea and you do need the bread.
Right. Well, and then the other twist, which Jack Dorsey wasn't at the hearing, but apparently there were a lot of senior Congress people who kept conflating Twitter issues with.
How come I can't do this?
Right. They kept asking the Google CEO, well, how come on Twitter this happens? And he's like, I don't know. I don't work at Twitter. I don't run Twitter. I run Google. They just were confusing all the technology, right, as one thing.
So that's kind of making my point too. Right. It's like, it's not the same thing. We cannot apply existing patterns to what today looks like, what these technologies. We need to break them down and find out what is it about Google's behavior, or what is it about the behavior of public around Google's business models that we think is wrong or needs to be corrected.
It's no different though, Dan, than, in our recent experience where we're publishing an app where, we don't like necessarily the way the process works to get the process to get an app into the App Store, right, with Apple, right? But
I don't mind it.
There are a lot of people, I will tell you this, a lot of people that were at Apple's last developer conference, a lot of developers that don't like being constrained into that you've got to do it this way, right? And there are only two rails. There's the Google Play Store rail and the Apple rail, right? And those are the only two methods that you have to produce an app.
For the most part, they're dominant. Right. Amazon was letting you download apps for a while too, and I don't know if you can actually download an app onto an iPhone that isn't on one of those platforms.
Right, and so the question becomes,
but you can on Google.
And the question becomes then the question that was the regulatory question for Apple was, again, the App Store as a business, if you were to take it outside of Apple, it would be this hugely successful, profitable company. Mm-hmm. Just in terms of, if you look at the revenue number on Apple's, P&L sheet. So should there only be two ways in the world to produce an app?
To host an app for sale?
Right.
Well, there's not only two. They're just the two prominent ones. The problem, I think, is not that these stores have such a high percentage of the app purchasing market. The problem is that they're both monopolistic in that they prefer their apps on their platform than other people's apps. And some apps aren't even available on the respective platforms because they're the other platform's apps, even if they're, let's say Apple, I think Apple made a bookshelf.
No.
It was a bookshelf or something like that, where you could store your books, and it was basically a book reader, a book organizer. And I think they made a version for the Play Store too. Mm. It's not on there anymore. Right. And I can't tell you what really happened. It's just, I have a strong indication that Apple chooses what to promote on its store and Google chooses what to promote on its store, and they don't promote each other's stuff readily.
No.
If they have any control over squelching it, that's the monopolistic part that we need to fix.
Well,
we need to make them fairer.
Right. Well, and that's what I think that was the most recent article that I read, was that Google got accused of, and again, I guess, if you own the rails, then let's say I have an app that keeps track of my medications that I take every day, and I put that out there on the Play Store. Well, then just so happen, let's say that Google has a very similar product to the one that I've created. That the practices that they're being accused of is they're promoting theirs over mine. Right.
And if you were Google and that was your platform and that was your product that you had invested $1 million or $2 million in,
wouldn't you do that?
You would be remiss if you didn't.
Right.
You've got stockholders that are wanting that money and deserve it. Right. So take every advantage that you can. And that might be the problem too, is that we're driven by conflicting motivations. Right. We've got to make money for our stockholders.
Right.
But is that the right thing to do? Right. Where do we draw the line between what's okay to make money for our stockholders and what isn't? But that's been talked about ad nauseum.
Sure. Yeah. So I guess that kind of sort of leads into one of the topics that we talked about.
You mean the topics that are on the list?
On the list, the second page of the list. No, is that I read an article. So the article was basically talking about how widely used, AI has gotten a lot of. It's the only best way for me to describe it is it seems like in our industry that AI is like this sexy idea, right? It's like people have got an Alexa in their house and they're equating that with AI. But then when you see the application of it inside of organizations, like inside of actual companies, right? The article was basically saying that it really hasn't penetrated the corporate market as deep as what people think it has, right? There are certain very clear arguments for certain specific industries. They mention like manufacturing and finance, but it's not a prevalent thing today across all types of companies. And so,
well, it depends on what you're talking about when you say AI. I think that is such a overused word. Right. And what does it actually mean to be artificially intelligent? Right. Because I've written, a script that acts pretty smart. Right. It always goes to the same place and clicks the right thing at the right time because I programmed it to. But I wouldn't say that it's actually AI. AI is neural networks that teach and learn on its own. Right. They experience, learn from it, grow. That's artificial intelligence, neural networks. But a lot of people, I think, are misusing the word artificial intelligence just because there's no standard definition that says this is and that isn't. Because writing code is it creates artificial intelligence. Your application that makes it so easy for you to take care of your finances. That's artificial intelligence, right? It's code that helps you think and get things done.
Right. It said that AI is anywhere between 11 to 30% of their business processes over the course of the next 3 years.
Who said that?
That this is MIT has a technology journal that they published it in. I guess there's like the idea of where you come down on like the ethics of AI or any new technology, right? So if somebody came to us with a project, I think that would be an interesting project, right? Where somebody comes to us where they want to use some new technology. And right now in the work that we do, I don't think there's a lot of questions around people asking us to build an app or build a platform of any sort, there's not a lot of questions around ethically, is it the right thing to build, right? I mean, we've never been faced with that I know of, right? But I'm just wondering where more and more newer technology and companies that are building it and that are using it, where they begin to draw the line to say, I'm just not comfortable building this way, right?
Did you hear about, what was it? GPT-3, what? Elon Musk's company, or one of his companies, OpenAI, released their artificial intelligent writing algorithm. I think it's GPT-3 this week. And it can write, just give it a few sentences, and it can take off and write really intelligently sounding articles. They will be complete gibberish, right? They have no, well, they have structure and they sound like they're legitimate things, but they have they're not rooted in fact at all. They're just a bunch of words that sound right together. In fact, they might sound quite eloquent, but they will be completely false. So it's pretty scary to think that, if you have somebody that's producing these fake things and, they could say some pretty atrocious things and it won't know it. It sounds good. Right. And when we start publishing those, what kind of disinformation, what kind of noise is that going to create in society, right? And that could really harm us. If you think about it right now, we depend on our hearing, right? For a lot of things, right? Crossing the street, hearing the red light tell you don't cross yet, all of those things, right? Well, what if somebody came by and took that away from us, that we no longer had the ability to hear? And it could happen that, we park a speaker over the earth that is so loud, none of us can hear anything but it, right? Well, that's the kind of noise that can be extremely disruptive and could change our whole way of life. So we don't want that noise, right? We definitely know that there's the ability to disseminate that information out there if it's false. And plus, if you have an artificial intelligent thing creating it and create massive amounts of it, I mean, it doesn't seem like that would kill us, but it certainly wouldn't make our lives better.
Right. Yeah, I guess that's what I'm getting at. I'm just thinking of like a situation where, specifically, in our day-to-day life here, where you have to build something that assumes certain ethics within it, right? And like I said, we haven't had to come across that yet. Although I will say that, there are plenty of projects that you work on day in, day out where you're explaining to your clients your values, right?
Right. I think
so. That's an example of while we're not building the thing that has the ethics built into it, we still, every day that we work with our clients, are saying, being transparent, being honest,
right.
All that. That's built into our interactions, right?
And that is the extent to which we can be ethical, I think. So, for instance, like that sensor that we're building.
You're right. Yeah, that's a good example.
We understand the risk that is involved with asking somebody to wear one of these sensors, because it's, if we build it, say we make a square, a cube, right, and put it on the back of their head. Well, they're at grave risk of falling backwards and having this thing crushed through their skull. So everything about the design, everything about the battery usage, what size battery, how much, what length of life that it would have, right? The charge within it, whether it can catch fire.
Yeah,
all of those things from the very beginning. We look at it from the human factor.
Right.
But I think everybody that does business does that. They just probably don't think about it. Right. They just think, I'm going to do the right thing. Or, I think most people are good. Right. I think most people that are doing business are not trying to get the better of some deal. They're just trying to bring value to the world.
I imagine a moment where somebody would come to us and they would say, hey, we want you to build this thing, and oh, by the way, we want to collect this data on the user that they probably wouldn't be okay with. I can't imagine that we would say, you know what, that's a good idea. We'll sign up for that.
I wouldn't not sign up for it. What I would demand, though, is that they let their audience know, like, this is what we're collecting and why, right? And if it's not going to fly, if it's not legitimate, if it's unethical, then it won't fly.
Right.
As long as they're transparent.
Right.
In fact, I told our client up the street that we talked to this morning.
Yeah.
I don't know why I don't want to mention their name.
It's okay.
I forgot where I was going with that now.
Well, I mean, I think we were talking about, I don't know if it was the idea around the database, the central database that we talked about, or if there was a different place you're going with that.
I don't even know,
Yeah.
to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
I flustered myself by going,
Right.
why don't I want to mention those people?
Those people.
I love them. They're good clients. So
Yeah.
don't get me wrong if you're watching this. I just,
Well, I think that let me ask this question: out of the following things, out of AI, machine learning, augmented reality, I thought some guy mentioned on the radio the other day, XAR. I don't know what that's sit for.
I don't either. But augmented reality is.
Yeah. So there's and augmented reality is different than virtual reality because that's the project that we're working on, right? So out of all four of those, I mean, which is the one that shows up the soonest in a small software development company, right? I mean,
You mean which one is the easiest to get started with? I mean,
which one becomes more prevalent? Which one do you think we will get more potential clients coming to us to say, hey, I'll help them go build this?
I think
with that?
VR is going to be big. Although I've said this for a while, VR is disruptive to your life in the sense that you have to stop your current reality in order to visit the virtual reality.
Right.
And they don't mix, right? If you've got to sit down in your real life, you've got to step out of your real world in order to put on your virtual world.
Right.
And it isn't at all times the easiest thing to do.
Right. I saw a guy yesterday on LinkedIn, and he had created this VR component, which sounded kind of odd to me, but where you put on the VR headset and it mimics your work environment. So it had a laptop that you were typing on. It had all these different monitors in effect that you could, move and swipe and focus on. So basically you went from your current reality of work into a virtual reality of work.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
So I can see this guy sitting there at his desk
Right.
with his monitors in front of him and his VR headset on, imagining his other monitors.
Right. It's like, I don't know, but,
Oh.
but no. And I think, Dan, on one of the projects we're working on now,
Let me answer your question, right?
Yeah.
So VR, I think, is closest, right? Right now, we know that there are massive amounts of uses for VR. We can cure PTSD. We can help a lot of people in a lot of situations, but it is disruptive to your reality. So we want to sit you down, have a session, and then let you out of it.
Right.
Right. In fact, we need to, because our bodies don't take being out of reality very long nicely.
Right.
A lot of people get sick to their stomach, they get headaches, dizzy, that kind of thing. So augmented reality, which doesn't quite take you out of your reality, it augments your reality.
Sure.
Right. So you, instead of having a background that is painted by the developer, like in our app, it's a soccer field, right? It's the real reality. If I'm looking through my augmented reality glasses at you, I see what I see. And it may be that I have artificial intelligence where I do image processing, and I know there's a chair in the background or there's a microphone, and I can tell you things about these objects as long as I've chosen to. That kind of technology is far more beneficial. And Google Glasses was probably the first attempt into that. And then HoloLens, and nobody's done it perfect yet. But they're getting closer and closer. And I honestly believe that when that becomes affordable and it actually works, it's going to be way bigger than virtual reality. But there's a lot of applications for virtual reality now. And, we could probably be reaching out to people and building them apps.
Right.
There's a lot of creative that goes into that, a lot more than regular development.
Right.
You've got to have all kinds of visuals and transitions and animations, and so it's pretty complicated. But there's a lot of bit of it. You just have to make sure that you're investing that money in something that will return.
I think whenever I think of the benefits of it, I always think of education, right? Maybe learning how to build something that you didn't know how to build before, or just a way to serve you educational material in a different way, I think is.
Yeah, well, but you got to think of it in terms of the added value, right? So if you can go on YouTube, which you can, and learn just about anything you want, and they'll actually show you how to do it. The benefit of having it in virtual reality would be that you would have a 360-degree video.
Right.
But most of the time when you're showing somebody how to do something, you're just looking right here, right? You're not looking, you don't need to have 360 degrees or, up and down, any of that stuff. So there's not a whole lot of added value for VR, in my opinion, for educational purposes. Plus, because people's bodies naturally resist it, right? I'm out of reality. I know I'm in a chair, but I can't feel it or see it. In fact, I might be standing on a plank or something, right? It's just disconcerting. So I don't know if that will take off as big as augmented reality would. If you can imagine augmented reality, it would be like carrying an encyclopedia assistant with you. As you walk through the world, it could point out all kinds of beautiful things about the world that you might not have known. Yeah,
the app that I saw the other day was a shoe app. You could try on different shoes with your phone.
Just hold them down there and you see what and that goes back to what I was saying. That is artificial intelligence, right? Nobody is sitting back there saying, okay, find a shoe, put it on there. That's a program that's doing that, but it's not a neural network. It's not a thinking program. It's not an artificially intelligent program. It just is artificially intelligent.
Right. Well, and what I was saying earlier was that I mean, from my perspective, at least that I've worked directly with on projects now is on the machine learning side, right? That in one of the projects that we're working on now, I mean, that's basically taking, a huge data set of, different data points in a particular study and saying, what does it tell us about those people, right? And what can we potentially predict about those people's behavior, right? And I don't know why maybe because for a developer to go from, that type of job to using machine learning to kind of be as an add-on to that, it seems like an easier jump to make in terms of applications.
Maybe for some. Yeah, I think machine learning is definitely a special skill, right? I think I'm good at math.
Yeah.
And I think I enjoy programming. But machine learning is kind of sleuthing, right?
Yeah.
You've got to, you twist and turn and knead the data, and you've got to keep it coherent at the same time. And you're just looking for anomalies that line up. And at some point you could find something that doesn't make any sense at all intellectually or logically, but it will be consistent, right? If you spent $2.7 a day on Nicorettes, that chances are you make $1 million a year or something as, not
so
seemingly related.
On one of our projects, I have the value benefit, odd experience maybe, of working with a developer and working with a data scientist at the same time. And I feel like I've worked enough with them right now. I feel like there's like this joke, like a data scientist and a developer walk into a bar, right? And you know, and there's some, you know, there's a punchline in there somewhere. But it is really interesting because like even today, there was a specific problem that we were trying to solve, and the developer looked at it like, you know, this is the task that needs to be performed, go do it. And it was as simple as that. But then when we involved the data scientist in it and said, actually, you know, what we're looking for is we're looking for this thing. We're looking for this pattern, right? And then the developer kind of had this kind of reaction like, oh, I didn't understand that, right? But they were still looking at the same problem, right? And they just had, it was just an interesting thing to follow their discussion about it, and kind of the way they were processing the problem, right? It was just different, right? But
that's why it takes all kinds.
Yeah.
So did the developer actually learn something in that meeting?
Exactly.
That's interesting because I know who you're talking about.
Right. So, but yeah, it's, and it's interesting. I mean, how do you distinguish between somebody who calls himself a developer versus a data scientist?
How do I distinguish between it? They're totally different. I mean, it's like distinguishing the difference between a business analyst and a bookkeeper.
Mm. Yeah.
Data scientists are really just looking, they're digging through tons of data, and, you know, they're using mathematical functions that change the shape of that data, and they're looking at the shape of the data, and I'm calling it shape, but it's really not. It's just a mental representation of it. And they're looking at it from all these different mental representations and trying to find spikes and dips, anomalies, that then they can figure out, oh, if that's an anomaly, is it consistent across this big set of data? And what does it mean?
Right.
My little sister is a data scientist, and she's been doing it about 5 years now, and she loves it. This is what she really digs doing, is looking at data, and especially bland data that doesn't seem very interesting, and finding those interesting tidbits of it. Whether it brings value to the company that's paying for it or not remains to be seen. And she doesn't have enough insight into what brings value to the company to be able to use that to guide what she's finding. She finds the stuff kind of like an archaeologist would.
Right.
And then at some later point, those findings get determined whether they're useful or not. You know, but the thought is that you find enough stuff, one of them is going to be worth $1 million or, you know, 10 billion or whatever it is. If you can draw conclusions where you couldn't before, well, that's an opportunity.
But and that goes back to one of the positions that Cerner always positioned itself was that we're looking at population data, right? And that it's going to tell us something about the way we can predict both disease and behavior in some way, right?
Cerner's collecting all the data from all the hospitals?
Well, I know that they have what's known as, they call it population health. Right. Mm-hmm. So what they're saying is, this is at least some analysis that I've read about, is that, you know, individually as hospitals, they're using the data to optimize in some way. Right. But at the same time, I think Cerner is looking at population data in terms of what do we know about a population of people who are all diabetic. Right. And what do we do with that information. Right. So one of our clients is that is the way that they're slicing the data, right? They want to know how individuals perform, but they also want to know how the population of all those people are performing, and what is it telling us, to your point about the way the data scientists look at it, right? So yeah, I think that the machine learning part of it, at least, and I don't know if I've got it right or not, but it just seems more practical in application right now, because maybe I see it more frequently day in, day out.
It is more practical.
Right.
It's more pragmatic.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can definitely, there's a lot of data out there. What isn't pragmatic about data science is that you go into it on a hope and a prayer that you're going to find some anomaly that anomaly will bring you value,
Right.
or you're going to find a lot of anomalies and that any one of them will bring you value. It's kind of like VC investing, right? You invest in a whole bunch of different things hoping that one hits.
Right. Yeah. And I think that the one thing that we're finding, not to give too much away about it, but that we're finding is because there are so many sources of data now, is one of the guys refers to this as the smoothing of the data, which I think always sounds kind of creepy, but I mean, there is the challenge, right? That you have data in so many places coming from so many different sources in so many different formats. How do we assemble that data in a way that allows us to really analyze it, right? And I think I think right now, especially in the healthcare industry, that's one of the biggest challenges that they're facing is we've got a nurse that's got this device with this application on it.
Right.
We've got a doctor who's using this. We've got our IS or IT department using all these other tools, right? And then that's been one of the whole purposes of Cerner and Epic for years, but it's becoming, I think, even more complicated. I was reading an article the other day just about this whole mHealth movement, which is just the utilization of mobile applications within the hospital setting, right? So anyway, yeah, that was interesting, I guess, about the whole.
So to go back to data science, you mentioned something. In order for data scientists to do their bit, finding anomalies, you've got to have a massive amount of data, and that data has to be coherent. It has to be the same. If you read a value from one device, then it's going to be the same value on the next device. But often, like you're saying, that isn't the case. So there are like 7 different disciplines for data scientists that involve integration and data scrubbing and data manipulation. And it's a lot of work. And it's, we're putting a lot of money towards it. I say we, not me personally, but in general, the world is. And it may be that it turns out that it's not as valuable as we had hoped, right? If we dig into a terabyte of data and we find $1 million idea, well, with that one sample, that 1 terabyte of data and that one effort, it would seem pretty likely that if we dig into 10 different terabytes of data that we would have 10 new $1 million ideas. But it isn't the case, right? It's just, we're finding things that are really valuable, but we have so much data out there. We don't know, it's going to take us a lot of effort and a lot of money to analyze it all. And it may be that we don't find as many of those black swans or,
Right. Well, I know it's a
Willy Wonka's chocolate factory tickets. That's what I was thinking. Yeah. One of them golden tickets.
Well, I just know that in healthcare, a lot of people see it as being this sort of a way to crack the code of healthcare, right? And
I agree, and it could be. And I would hate to not look at it just because of my previous statement, right? We could actually go from, with some machine learning, with a little bit of artificial intelligence, we could go from a symptom treating methodology or approach to medicine to maybe understanding that all of these symptoms develop around, the fact that we eat too much processed food, for instance, or we shouldn't be eating gluten, or any one of those kinds of things that we seem to be leaning towards now or moving towards as a society. I would love for the data to show that concretely. But if it did, then we would lose a lot of data, right? We wouldn't need this massive amount of data because we would have figured it out.
Right.
As far as healthcare data goes, right? We would stop collecting all this stuff because, we got it. Guess what? All this time, we shouldn't have been eating like that.
Right. And I think in a lot of ways that it'll just be affirmation, right? It'll just say, yeah, we thought that eating a bunch of processed food was not good for you.
Validation.
Yeah, there you go. Right.
We knew we were killing ourselves with those Butterfingers.
Right. So, well, anyway.
Well, hey, let's take a short break.
Oh, okay.
And we're back.
Yes, indeed.
So we were talking about artificial intelligence, specifically machine learning, data science.
Right.
And we are doing a project that is there machine learning going on with the diabetes project?
Uh-huh. The data scientist that I was talking about earlier, that's what he's using. So,
I thought he was just organizing the data and somebody else was actually processing it.
No,
doing the analysis.
He's doing, from my understanding of it is he's actually applying machine learning to the population of people in the study to see what it tells them, right? And, there's some other stuff that he's doing too that has more to do with, like you were saying earlier, looking for anomalies and looking for patterns in the data. I think what's going to be interesting is the sort of research conclusions that they're going to be able to reach with it. So
have we talked about that project at all? You want to dive a little deeper into it and just...
Yeah. So there's a study that's hypothesis or goal, if you will, is to understand, and this goes back to kind of what we were talking about earlier, to understand the impact of glucose and exercise on diabetes. Mm-hmm. And so one of the ways that we are, which, is, I guess, a unique approach to taking in the study is how do you gather all that data from a person, right? Well, you've got to track what they eat. You got to track how they exercise, right? And so there's there's a billion different ways that you could do it, right? We give everybody Fitbits. We could strap a Garmin device to their wrist. Just think of all the devices you could use just to keep track of those two elements. Right.
And they're not really direct competitors. Some of them have value that other ones don't. And the ones that don't have that value have a different value.
Right. And so we're using an app to collect data about food intake. We're using a heart rate monitor to collect exercise data.
Right.
And then we're using another app to collect information about their insulin levels. And we're just aggregating all that data together so that a research group, a data scientist can look at that data and start, understanding what it's telling them, right? If, like you said, maybe if anything, we don't know yet.
Right.
But the study's about halfway through. It's probably got another 6 to 12 months to go. But it is, at least from my perspective, having been running it for the last year, it really has been challenging because when COVID happened, the realization was that there were all these clinical studies across the entire United States that all got shut down because they were in person, right? You had to go to the hospital and you had to check in and you had to go somewhere, right?
Right.
Well, this study was all remote. I mean, it's all you and all your devices at home, right? And so it sort of validated, I think, for our client that you can run a study remotely and collect all the data the way you need to.
You just have to use wearables and you have to use the technology that's available today.
Right. Which doesn't seem like a mind-blowing idea, but
healthcare does in a lot of ways, but they're really expensive technology. It's the inexpensive, easy to use stuff that they have yet, the not complex stuff that they have yet to integrate, I think.
And I think that the one thing that we are finding is, which is not surprising, is certain people are really disciplined about doing, recording all their data, right? And then you get other people that just, aren't really that disciplined about it, right? And so the
people in the study,
the data collection becomes problematic when, and granted, these people are being paid, so they should have at least dollar motivation.
Well,
right?
yeah, depending,
But you also have people that just, they're, in your daily life. If I gave you 10 devices, Dan, and said, do all 10 of these every day for the next month, would you get a little bit of?
It depends on if you were giving me $1.
Right. But if I was giving you $1,000, right?
Well, I mean, and that's the problem. Where is everybody's $1,000?
Right.
Right.
Right. But I'm just saying that there's a certain breakdown of if I give you too many tasks in a given day, money or not,
right,
you'll lose a certain level of,
Well, in a sense, it's kind of like writing a software program or a website. If it's too hard to use, it's not worth it. Right. It doesn't matter what value it brings.
Right.
Frictionless software. It's got to be easy. It's got to be intuitive. These devices, these programs that are created to collect the data, the programs that we write to collect the data,
right,
we need to make them bulletproof. We need to make them idiot-proof.
It's kind of comical to me when I think of the people that are in this study day in, day out recording all their information. And all I can envision is like just a person just strapped with everything on, like I got this on, I got that on, and just like, walking around their house trying to keep track of every movement and behavior that they.
Oh, and they all vibrate too. So
yeah, right. So you're shaking, but I mean, from an interesting, if you look at the data and you look at the way the study is being conducted, and you look at, I'm not a scientist, so I don't understand the findings per se, but it is interesting to be looking at the data every day and just kind of, noticing the patterns that you can kind of see.
So with this project, we actually integrated all of these disparate data types, and we ran into that problem that you talked about, which is two devices that record the same thing may record them differently. And how do you deal with that kind of data? And that's a problem wherever you go, right? And what I found, which I was shocked by, tell me if you've realized this yet or not. If you the same dosage on two different devices of injector pens,
right,
will actually be a different amount of medicine,
right?
Because they each measure. I didn't know there's that flexibility in how you measure stuff. It seems like we'd want to lock that down, right, standardize it.
Well, probably a larger challenge has been this idea of time, right? So imagine all these devices and the way they record time and simplifying that. So, this is a nationwide study. So you've got multiple people in multiple time zones.
Right.
And then you've got however a device records their time. We've got, do they record it in local time? Do they have a UTC component? What is the structure of the way all these devices record time? And that has been probably one of the more challenging aspects of it. Because again, multiple devices. Well,
that's how come we came up with UTC though. Right. We didn't come up with it, but
right.
If you just force everybody to use that, then
right,
we're all good.
Right.
But yeah, we were really challenged in this project because of that, because in the beginning, we didn't expect that people were going to be all over the place. We didn't expect that two different phones or two different devices would
right,
save the information and then the phone would transmit it differently than a different phone. Yeah, there was all kinds of learning
Well, and then what happened was we were worried about that. COVID happened. Now nobody's going anywhere.
Nobody's traveling.
Right.
That's right.
Right. So now it's not an issue.
But we fixed that problem.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Right. So no, but that's been an interesting project for sure. And then that's led to some other projects for the same.
So the goal with that project, though, is that we're going to collect all of this data, aggregated data, diabetic information about their health and when they take their medication and how much food they eat and all of that, in hopes that we can reduce the need to give people insulin as much as we do now in the future. We just mandate, I guess, and tell me if you've been told this too, that we're really not that efficient with respect to diabetes, right? We give people medication, but that medication might only be 5 to 7% effective, depending on whether they take it at the right time and the right dosage, and if they're exercising or all those other factors.
Yeah, I mean, there's the sheer way that we administer ways to manage that disease is challenging. I mean, so right now, a lot of people are, still use, injection of insulin pens to control their blood sugar, right? But now there's been this new technology that's been developed, has been these continuous glucose monitors, right? Where you wear a specific device and it manages your blood sugar throughout the day, right? So you're not doing all the injections, right?
So it's measuring your blood sugar or your, I guess, nutrients in your system and dosing insulin just like your body would,
right?
Or in a similar way.
And so you've got an app that connects to the device on your shoulder or on your arm, on your stomach, or wherever. And then you're monitoring it throughout the day via the app, but you're also able to say, my blood sugar's tanked. Now, maybe administer a little bit more, right?
All right.
So that was seen as this huge sort of innovation in managing diabetes. But one of the things that they talk about is this closed loop thing,
right?
Which is just to say, as my understanding is just to say, we know that we're getting more and more efficient at the way we're doing this. The closed loop would be the most efficient way for us to be able to do that, right? If
we could, right now with the 5 to 7% effectiveness, 93% ineffective in dosing insulin means that there's this huge variable in there. Right. I don't know that we could get better at it consistently when there's that much variability.
Right.
So I think if we take baby steps in those directions, eventually we can get to where we narrow down where the problems are. And if we can narrow down where the problems are and then programmatically correct for them, then we're close to having a closed loop system. Right. Closed loop system being one that checks itself, monitors your levels, blood levels, doses you, and then checks to make sure that the result was what it was supposed to be, and then continually loops.
Well, and there's this, and they also talk about it in the context of sort of like creation of like an artificial pancreas.
Yeah, there's all kinds of. Right. I mean, I think aren't pacemakers closed loop systems?
Right. Exactly. That's a good example. Right.
Well, but closed loop system is becoming more and more desirable. I guess people are recognizing that everything that they do should be a closed loop system. Business processes and things like that. If we can close the loop, then we don't have to hire a person to do it. All we have to do is just check to see that it's not out of some extreme tolerance, right?
Well, not to jump to the next topic, but
that's kind of what I was.
Think of the closed loop of your sales process, right? So, like right now, for the listeners, what what we're in the process of building and understanding is, for a small business, what is the most efficient way for us to build our sales process?
Right. And we need it to be efficient because ultimately the client pays for it.
Right.
Right. And if we're going to do our best for our client, then we need to do our best for ourselves to reduce our total overhead so that our clients don't have to suffer the cost of it.
Well, right. And I think the example that we have recently experienced that was a very frictionless process was we had partnered up with this company called Chatmetrics for our website.
Terry Wilson.
Yeah. And literally from the moment we got on the phone with him to the moment that we were implemented and collecting, being able to use the service, if you will, was 10 days.
And
most
of that was me.
Right. I was going to say it was most of it was us, but yeah, it was just, and just stepping back and examining it from a sales process perspective. I mean, granted, what they're providing versus what we provide is different, but it was a lesson in, wow, wouldn't that be a great experience to be able to get somebody up to that level of a fast, efficient process to get somebody up and running.
It was delightful. It really was.
Yeah.
Now, we got introduced to him. I talked with a guy on LinkedIn who I've chatted with a few times, and he and I got on a call to talk about each other's business, find out how we could help each other. He said, "You know who you need to talk to?" Right. So in his mind, he made that connection between Chatmetrics and us, and so he reached out to the guy, said, "You guys should talk." Great. Terry, when we were on the phone with him, said, how did you guys hear about us? Because he had forgotten that we were introduced, and so did I, quite honestly. But I imagine he gets a lot of his business like that, because after we implemented him, I mean, almost immediately I said, "Tyler, you need this," right? Mm-hmm. My son owns a window cleaning company, and he gets a lot of his sales through inbound leads. So they come to his website or his Facebook or somewhere like that, and this would be ideal for him. Now, we told Terry, Chatmetrics, that we don't have a lot of people coming to our website looking for us. The ones that do are definitely, we want to talk to them. But because we don't have the volume, we haven't put a lot of effort into manning that site. So I'm sure he will provide a lot of benefit to us just by actually being able to engage with real people when they come to your site.
Right.
And he will let us know just immediately that we need to call somebody. So that will be extremely helpful as far as us providing customer service. But for Tyler, I mean, this could double his business.
Yeah.
And it was just through word of mouth because I trusted him. So I don't know how Terry's trying to sell his stuff, but whatever he's doing is working. And if we could get people to promote us that easily, that would be extremely helpful. Obviously, two different products, like you said, though.
Right. Yeah. And I think the other part is this sort of like, strapping together this, so one of the things that we're doing is we're partnering with a company to do lead generation. We're partnering with a social media company. And then obviously the Chatmetrics side of that. And we're integrating all that using Pipedrive as our CRM, using a MailChimp campaign for the email campaign. And right now we're just experimenting with how the parts interact and what value each one of those gives.
And we also have like Cloud Funnel or something in there.
Yeah, OutFunnel, which is kind of the piece between Pipedrive and MailChimp. And so, the goal of trying all those things out and using those different companies is to ultimately, create awareness of who illumisoft is and what we do using email, social media, podcasting, to say, okay, let's create some awareness out there about who we are and people understand kind of what we stand for, if you will. And then once we have enough interest that has been generated or created, once they enter the process of level of interest, what is the most efficient way to go from interest to a conversation to a project that they want to do, right? So that's kind of the sales process experiment we're kind of going through right now. I think we're going to rekindle or retool it, and we'll probably have some changes to it. But yeah, I wanted to, in our own way, represent the same process that Chatmetrics kind of put us through, so that by the time somebody gets on our website and begins to chat with us, they're there and they've already, maybe they know a lot about us, right? So, my hope is that by the time we have sort of the initial, say, meeting Zoom call now with them, that they walk in knowing just a lot about who we are, right? Because they've learned about it from all these different perspectives or different channels, if you will. So
hopefully that's the idea.
Yeah.
You mentioned putting all of these pieces together, and it's been quite a journey for us to get to where we're at.
Yeah.
So we use Pipedrive CRM right now,
right.
But even we've kind of bought into it at this point because we've integrated things with it. But so let me go back. We started this journey to build our awareness, right? Just a month or two ago. Put a little money away and decided we're going to invest in doing some social media, doing some video, doing some posting, just try and build awareness and hopefully generate leads. And so we had a few companies reach out to us on LinkedIn and via email, and we responded to some of them and started interviewing these companies. And what we found is some of them were really sharp and prompt and they showed up, and some of them were really good at getting you to schedule a call, and then maybe not so good from that point.
Right.
And some of the things that I saw that affected whether or not I wanted to do business with them was their promptness. I mean, if you're a minute late to a call that you scheduled, I don't know. If that's the only thing I have to go by, then that's a negative. Right. If I've got a guy that showed up 5 minutes early and a different company that showed up a minute late, I'm definitely going with the guy that showed up 5 minutes early.
Right. And I think the other part is which is kind of weird that you have to say this, but if your business is improving the sales process, then you better make sure your sales process is pretty well defined, right?
Well,
I mean, you're in the business of helping other people with their sales, so you better have your process down pretty well.
Well, Matt, they say this a lot about technology companies too, right?
Sure,
especially web development companies,
right?
Right. Most web development companies have not put the time into their own website,
sure,
because they're busy doing other people's. Or really, the bottom line is that if you haven't built out everything in your business, it's because you haven't.
Right. Yeah.
You still may be moving in that direction, but.
Right. But I would think that part of you selling your service as a sales optimizer would at minimum involve your ability to show up on time to a meeting.
I would definitely agree with that.
Right. So, but I do think that I do sort of, because to go back to, our earlier attempts at building a sales process, and I think a lot of small businesses kind of struggle with it. I mean, if we were to take a poll of small businesses, one of the top areas that they would cite that they needed to improve upon would be, how do I get more business, and how do I do it really efficiently, right? And so I think we're not unlike other small businesses in that for a while, we thought, hire some people to do our sales, and that'll be a solution. then oftentimes what a lot of small companies do is the owner says, I don't need salespeople. I'm going to go out there and I'll bring in all the projects, right?
Right.
And then it's a mixture of things, right? Then it's the next thing is, I don't want to pay for a salesperson. I'm an owner. I don't have time to go out and do it. So what we need to do is invest a lot of money in marketing, right? So we'll throw a bunch of money at marketing and social media, and we'll just wait for the leads to flow in, right? And then, it seems like it's always with small business. We're always kind of turning the knobs, trying to find what combination of things is going to work.
Right, because we don't have that magic bullet, right? We don't. I think that it's possible with machine learning, and if you capture a lot of data,
right,
to know exactly which one of those knobs you should turn, or whether you should create a new knob, or whatever the analogy is.
Right.
But I don't think that it's feasible for new businesses, right? We don't have the money. We barely have the money to stay alive, and possibly to pay for our rent. We've got to try something. So you make a lot of mistakes along the way, until you get to the point that you've saved up where you can invest. We don't even know if we're investing in the right things yet, though.
Right.
I mean, so I'm not trying to say that we've got it figured out. We certainly don't.
No. I don't think, honestly, Dan, I've told the story, I think in the first podcast, was my experience at RSI. And Bob was in business ultimately for 30 plus years. And every year it was try something different. Keep trying something different on the sales side. So, I mean, he had done it for 30 years. He had tried all those things that I talked about earlier, all those combinations. He had tried all those by the time I showed up. And then he had been in business for, at that point, 20 years, right? So I think I think there's been a lot of technology has improved tremendously the way that we go about selling a service or a product, right? And the sheer automation and the amount of data that we know about people in terms of sales and how to attract people and how to persuade people. There's a lot of science out there now about what we know about how people buy and why they buy, right? But I think the one thing that me and you have agreed on that is important is how do you actually build somebody that trusts you?
How do you build trust in a relationship? Yeah.
And I think that is the, call it secret sauce or whatever you want to call it, but that is the thing that you've got to be really good at doing. And, one thing that not to go back, but to connect to one thing that I heard when the tech CEOs were on Capitol Hill testifying is they were evaluating each of their performances, and they were like, well, Zuckerberg was kind of this way. And they said, at the end of the day, being likable is an important thing. Right. And if those people, and if you looked at all those guys testifying representing all those different companies, Tim Cook comes off as the most likable. Right. And
he's the most polished.
Right.
In my opinion.
And they said, so we translate likability, we like that guy, to, I like Apple products.
I probably trust him.
Right. See? And so, and that's a real thing. And some companies and some people try to manufacture that, but it's not who they truly are. And so they end up, at the end of the day, losing clients over that. But if you're genuine, if you're authentic, and people tend to like being around you, have a sense that you know what you're talking about, or that you have a certain expertise, and just generally want to do business with you, that counts for a lot.
Sure it does.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think what truly counts, what the bottom line in anything that you interact with somebody about, is being honest, right? If your intention is to be honest, and your intention isn't to take from somebody or steal from somebody, but you have good intentions towards other people and you're honest about it, people will notice that, right? So will that build trust? Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's what builds trust. If you tell people you're honest or you put off an honest nature, but you do things that are slightly not harmonious to that, then the opposite takes effect, right? You just said you were my friend, but clearly you're not my friend, right? So you must be an enemy, right? So it goes completely back the other way. And sending out emails, cold emails was one of the things that we've talked about doing. And I have a pet peeve about that, because when I get an email, if the subject line is RE anything, and I haven't talked to you before, you're lying to me. That's a subtle but significant lie, right? And I think those things come across. A lot of people use those little tactics because people are more, it's gimmicky, but it's a lie. You know, even if it's just a little white lie, you don't start off a relationship with a little white lie.
Right. Well, to be fair, our email campaign went out with the word "quick question," so.
I know. And so here's my problem, Matt. If I was going to create my own campaign to do email, cold email marketing, not a single email would be sent. And if it did, it would be say something like, "I'm sorry for bugging you," and that's probably it.
Right.
Why?
Well, to your point, Dan, I mean, maybe that's the validation that we get out of this. Maybe the validation that we get out of it is it says, and this is true, right? Every industry, I mean, I think about this in terms of the audience that we're appealing to here, right? I mean, these are important people with important jobs, with challenges that I can't even begin to imagine every day. A lot
of responsibility.
Right. And that maybe we find that this way to interact with them is not the right way, right? That we find that actually, no, they would prefer it if we did interact with them cold email, but maybe they would prefer if we interact in some other way, right?
Yeah.
And
I had a survey done by Proof Positioning, Grant Gooding and team. And they said that most CEOs prefer, so I get a list of like 600 CEOs that I'm connected to that I have their email addresses. And they did a survey, and of the 300 or so that answered, most CEOs prefer to get cold emails as opposed to having to go out and find the services they need or reach out to somebody on LinkedIn. So I am the anomaly, right? That I don't like to get them. I don't really mind getting them. What I mind is that I immediately see the inconsistencies in that so if you get 100 BS emails from marketers, you begin to hate marketers.
Right.
But there's one in there that maybe isn't BS. And I got one yesterday, very clearly said in the subject line, "Do you need help with your software development team?" Or I can't remember exactly what it said, but it was very clear. And the text inside the email was very to the point. Like, look, we're a company. We provide this service. We think you can benefit from it, but we don't want to take up too much of your time. And then at the bottom, they had this big, long disclaimer that basically said, "We are doing our best to follow this CAN spam," or some code that was put in place a few years back. So our email subject is direct and to the point. Our content is not whatever, it's not bullshit. None of this is bullshit. But if you want to be removed, please click remove. And I was reaching for it, but I thought, no, this is an honest email. I don't get many of those. So I'll probably read it again and then see if I really want to do business with them. But the fact that I read through that email at all is is an anomaly. But because I didn't delete it and I didn't remove myself from it, that's 1 in a million that happens. And so that's the kind of approach I would love. That's the effect I would love to have on people. If we're going to send out cold emails, I want them to feel good that they got it.
Right. Well, and I think that this is one thing that I hope that that a person that is interested in doing business with us understands. And this is sometimes a little bit challenging for people to understand, but I have seen this work in past positions that I've been in, which is, we talk a lot about once the project's in the door that we want to be stewards of our clients' money or time or resources, whatever, right? But I think it begins even before that, in that understanding very early on how a solution that we're going to build for you is going to help make your company better, right? So as an example, if the one project that I'm thinking of is if they implemented the solution that we built by the owner's own estimation, it was going to double his revenue of his company. That's a powerful, meaningful result of the work that we did. Right. So I think it's imperative, at least in the very initial conversations that we have with people, is to ask the question, what is this going to do for your business? Because that's ultimately why they're approaching us. That's ultimately why we're gonna implement the thing, and they're gonna see it, but the reality of the result of it is that something's going to happen that's going to help better their company.
Right.
And that is an emotional thing, right? They're going to say, I went to illumisoft, they built this thing, it increased my revenues by X number, and now my company is way more successful than what we were before illumisoft.
Right.
And that's the kind of emotional connection that I think, what I hope part of the beginning of the sales process starts to kind of, that we get really good at nailing down those kinds of things with people, is how can what we do make your company better?
I honestly don't think that we should take a project unless we have identified not only that they can see the path from investment to return on investment, but that it's a reasonable one from our perspective. Mm-hmm. Because if we can't make it come true, if we can't see that we can make it come true, then we shouldn't do it. Right. Because we're the technologists, we're the guide. Right. We should not guide our clients, into a dangerous place unless we know the way through.
Well, and also, I think back to a conversation we had last year with a company, and we periodically have these where, somebody's got like seed funding, or, they've got a little bit of money from a pitch kind of meeting or something. And they come to us and they say, we want you to build this thing for us. We think that if you build it the right way, this could turn into X for whatever our startup company is, right?
The next Facebook or...
Right. Or whatever they think it's going to be. And the danger, there's a lot of dangers. There's a lot of risk with doing that kind of work. But the one big danger that I oftentimes think that gets overlooked is we can build that thing for you, but not in isolation. In other words, I don't have an insight into how well you are at selling that. I don't know how well you're good at building a company around that.
Right.
There's all these components to them building a business around the technology thing that we built for them that contributes to whether they are successful or not.
Absolutely, man. And we could see a lot of those.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you look at it, if they toss their project over the wall to us, that's a good indicator, right? Because if that really is their plan for going live, then basically they've abdicated all their risk to somebody else.
Yeah.
And if that's the only thing we know about them, then we can guess that that's who they are.
I can think of like at least more than a handful, and I'm sure it's higher for you, but in particular, one company that came to us from, I think, Texas, and they wanted us to build them a dog walking app, right? Yeah. And we started asking some pretty tough questions early on in terms of like, well, how are you going to roll this out? And what restrictions and permission? They're just some pretty basic kind of things. And it was apparent that they had not thought of any of it. And it was kind of like, well, wait a second, that's a dangerous position for us to walk into, is to build this when you can't answer some pretty basic things.
Well, because our reputation is on the line. Every project we do, we can't have a failed project.
Right.
Even if it is on the client's side, even if the responsibility for that failure is on their side,
Right.
we don't want to notch our belt with a failure either.
And I don't know, Dan. I mean, I've asked you this question before, but I don't think anybody that comes to us through our sales process, there's very few people that we won't talk to, right? I mean, it's not as if we have
I'll talk to anybody, man. Just maybe not very long.
Right. but what I'm getting at is that, we've talked to people in the range of startups with very little money to large corporations with a bunch of money. Yeah. Right. So, but I do think on that continuum of startup to huge corporation, I do think that there's also a corollary to our level of risk with each one of those, right? That potentially that on the risk side of the equation, startups, people with, less money presents maybe a larger risk for us.
Absolutely, because they only got one shot to make it successful. And most technology projects require some flexibility because you never know where it's going exactly. You can guess pretty closely for a very small project, but you've got to have a buffer. And the bigger companies do have that buffer. And so they can take, an okay project that drags on 30% too long and they can still weather it and it'll become successful.
Right. But I think that there are opportunities where people that have a defined path forward for their startup or for their idea, that have really thought through how they're going to take that idea and make it a reality. That if somebody comes to us with a really well thought idea, a good path forward in terms of funding and financing, that somehow decreases our feeling of risk, right? If it's well planned out or thought out.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. And, having the money, because technology projects haven't been done before. If they had, you would just purchase it. Right. So they have inherent risk in that. That's why we take an agile approach, because you have to be agile. You got to be able to move and pivot. And if you're going to get to some place that you can call success, then you've got to be flexible.
Right.
Right. So, if you come to me, and I've had many people come to me from the sandbox, right? That have $20,000 or $24,999, right? And that's great. That's a good chunk of money to get started with. You better use it wisely, and you better make really good decisions because you've got one shot at it, one shot. And I often, I haven't done any of those projects, to tell you the truth, because I tell them right off the bat, this is a huge amount of risk. If you're going to spend this money, make sure that you are doing it in the most efficient way, which, even though I'm efficient, I'm expensive. So for them, they need to dig in and learn some of it themselves. They need to hire the people that they can afford, and they need to piece it together until they have more money.
Right.
Well, I had a couple other things. So I wanted to talk about these companies that we talked to. In general, right? We were reaching out to people that could handle some marketing, some aspect of marketing for us, either SEO or lead generation or podcast editing or social media posting and monitoring. And what I found that I think might be by design, or maybe just because everybody's trying to find their niche, is that it's really hard to find 3 companies that all do the same thing,
right? And
to get them to give you a quote for that thing so that you can compare them by the price. So first of all, there's that. You can't compare them by price easily. Second of all, even if you can, you can't measure quality of that, right? They can say, we're going to post 3 times, we're going to send out this many emails or do this many things, but the quality is, there's a huge variability in there, and company A might charge half as much as company B, but produce half the quality result too. And you can't tell until you began working with them. And that's that's a problem, right? You
Right.
can't compare them adequately. You don't know what you're going to get until after you've already chosen somebody. And then there's this huge difference in cost too. Like we talk to companies and we were pretty much asking for the same thing, right?
Right.
We want somebody to get out there and every month produce leads for us
Right.
by sending some emails, by engaging with people on LinkedIn, by using all the things that we know that work for us. And we had one company said we can do that for $1,200, $1,299 a month.
Right.
And we had another company that said, well, we can do part of that for $1,500 a month. And we had another company said, yeah, we can do all that and more for $25,000 a month.
Yeah.
And so I've got targets all over the board, and I don't know where to pull that trigger. I wanted to be honest, I wanted to pull the trigger on the super expensive one. But that would have been, that would have emptied my ammunition right there. If that didn't hit, if that didn't sink the ship,
Sure.
so to speak, right?
Well, here's an interesting sort of, if you were to flip the script a bit about it, right? It's the same, I think it's the same experience that people that buy our services go through, right?
I do too.
They say, well, wait a second, let me see if I can compare this software development company who does or doesn't do UI, UX, right, to this other company who does all that. And so it's like, it's if you're me, it's like, all right, we'll just build the metrics, right? The matrix of here's all the companies, and then here's all their capabilities, and then here's what they're charging. How do I make a good decision, right? And throughout this process, going back to the sales kind of vendors that we talk to, you don't want to make this like, well, I hope this works out, right? This sort of decision that you don't feel entirely confident in, but you're like, the old adage of, well, you pay for what you get kind of thing. I think going into this and making those decisions was, again, going back to risk, it felt a little risky on some of these to make the decision to not go with or to go with,
It did. And that made me think a lot about what our clients go through when they deal with us, right? And I honestly believe that we treat our clients really well and that we have an advantage over other companies with a little less experience. But I don't know that it is readily apparent to people that engage with us. And I would love to start working on that, because this has been an eye-opener for me, dealing with these companies and finding Terry Wilson of Chat Metrics and seeing the frictionless implementation of our frictionless creation of our relationship.
Right.
And the fact that I turned around and promoted him to other people. And I'm expecting good things from that.
Right.
I would love to be able to start projects off much quicker than we can now, and have our clients feel like that was easy, right? So I've already started looking at our approach, and we need more documentation. We need things like this. So this is part of the reason why we're doing the podcast. People need to understand who we are and what drives us, what motivates us in business and in relationships. A few years back, 5 years ago, maybe, I created some videos and put them out on YouTube. And of the 20-something to 30-something videos I created, I think 2, maybe 3 of them are actually published out there. And every once in a while, somebody will engage with me and they said, yeah, I've gone out there and I've read I watched your videos and I've read your blogs, and you guys are the people that I want to work for.
Right.
And those are the people that I want to work with.
Oh, sure.
Right? Because if they've done their homework, they understand inevitably that you can't accurately gauge a vendor in our field until you've worked with them. And so what are you left with, Matt? How did we gauge our vendors in the end?
Well, it was a level of trust, right?
That's it,
that you
right, a little bit of trust, a little bit of cost too.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, and what's been interesting though, Dan, just to highlight that, has been in one case, one company, we dealt directly with the owner, and they presented themselves and their company with this huge level of high energy and really had a plan for how they were going to help us out. And sometimes people buy people, right?
Right.
You
Who are you talking about?
With Explode, social media.
Yeah. Lindy.
Yeah.
She was very high energy, very friendly.
Yeah.
Very likable.
Right.
I didn't realize it then, but that would be the last time we saw her.
Right. The downside being is that then you hand us off to somebody else to run the campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt like I was dealing with two different companies.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, she handed it off to Matt Jones, and Matt Jones was on it.
Yeah.
Right. But he had a goal. His goal was to get a team in place.
Right.
And then the team was in place, and then it started to really diverge from that.
Right.
That feeling that we bought, that we paid for.
Yeah, and to be fair, that happens more frequently in transactions.
Yeah, it happens with us too.
Right.
I mean, because I'm not going to go in there and write the code.
Right.
I'm not going to manage the project, but I will go in there and sell you on our services. And it's inevitable. We have to find a way to make it frictionless.
Right.
That's the bottom line. We have to find a way to make it frictionless, because this is a very risky business for people to pay us. It's a very risky endeavor for people to hire us and pay us a lot of money to build them something, regardless of what it is, and regardless of the potential for return on investment. You've got to get to that point that you can start getting the return on investment, and it's quite expensive sometimes to get there, even if you do a minimum viable project or minimum viable product. So if you're going to go that route, you'd better trust the people. And I would say spend more time evaluating their character instead of less.
Well, and to that point, especially in new relationships, it kind of depends on your level of comfort, I guess. But I mean, one of the things that I like to talk about, and that is demonstrated through, I mean, somebody could get this feeling from watching these podcasts, obviously, but if through our campaign that a lead came in and they wanted to schedule a meeting with us to talk for kind of that initial appointment. I mean, one of the things that I want to talk about is I want to explain very early on what the values of the person across the table from you are, right? I want to be, what I mean by that is everybody's got a code that they live by, right? Mm-hmm. They've got a code of how they were raised by their parents.
So you want to understand their values.
Yeah, absolutely.
And their character, right?
I want them to understand ours.
I thought you were saying, I want to understand what their value to me is.
No,
but that's not.
If I'm interacting with a potential client and they're looking at us like a transaction, just, Dan, go build this thing, have it done by this date, and that's all we want. That's something that we would do. But from a business perspective, there's also an argument to say, I want to understand the values of the person across the table from me that really truly values partnership, right? That wants to do a transaction with me, but wants to build a longer term relationship with a company like us.
Right. If I hear you right, you're saying that that's what we enjoy the most.
Right.
We will, if somebody comes to us and they have the budget, it's a reasonable budget, and they have the plan, and they have the expectations, and we can meet them, yeah, we'll take that project every single time.
Right.
Most projects are not like that. In fact,
no,
I haven't seen one of those yet. I know that they should be able to exist theoretically, but I haven't seen them. And so for the most part, we want to build relationships with our clients because we've got to find that plan together with them as it emerges.
Right. And what I'm getting at too, though, is we can have the intention of wanting to build good relationships with other people, but they've got to be willing to see they have to be willing to want to have the same thing from us. Right. And we've got to be really good at building relationships. Right. It's one thing to want them It's another thing to say that you're good at keeping them, right?
There's also a little bit of a nuance on top of that.
Yeah.
Because some people don't realize that they should value the relationship as a priority, right? They may say, well, I've got 2 guys or 3 companies. They all say that they can do it. They all say that they can do it really well. And this one is going to charge me half, right? If they don't realize they're making the wrong decision, that you are going to get what you pay for, you are going to get frustration, you are going to not get the code and the project that you really want, then you wouldn't have chosen that based on the dollar amount.
Right.
We have lost many a project because of that, because we didn't take the time to educate the person on what they really should be looking for in terms of a vendor, right? They're looking for a vendor. What they should be looking for is a relationship.
Absolutely.
And a partner. So hopefully you're listening to this and call us right now.
Right.
Walla Walla, Washington.
Well, and I think that there are plenty of companies out there, Dan, like us, who they're fine being vendors, right? They're fine just, I'm just here to execute, right? Execute the project. And I don't have any, I'm going to build volumes of relationships, vendor relationships, right? But I'm not married to any of them, right?
Well, that's an approach to business. I mean,
sure.
I know quite a few of the companies in town. I used to think that I knew a majority of them, but I'm pretty sure that more companies are popping up every month than I am keeping track of. But I can tell you, there's multiple people with multiple approaches, and I can't say that any one of them is better than another, except mine. I think mine is the best approach, and I think it has the most long-term benefit.
All right.
But who's to say, and until it has.
Right.
One of my really good friends runs a company here in town, and his approach is very transactional. Now, I know that they have core clients that they do a lot of projects for, but the way that they intend on keeping that client and getting their next project from them is by getting done with this project on time, on budget, exactly what they said they would do when they said they would do it. And they're really good at that. And I like that approach. I really do. But I really think if they were friends with these people in addition, and I don't know that they're not, but I think building that human side of it from company to company would only make that relationship better, right? There's no way that it could detract from it. It can only make it better. I got friends in town that run a business around building subscription type relationships. Look, we'll do all your development for a certain amount a month. And then their goal, the way that they make money, is that they try and reduce the amount of time that they have to spend on somebody by automating, by cutting corners, by that kind of thing. And that's not a bad idea either, but it's a completely different client than what we're looking for. And so I've said for a long time, I don't think we really have any true competition in this town, mostly because, just like we experienced when we're hiring marketing partners, we're not all selling the same thing.
Right.
Right. We're all selling aspects of technology, right? Software or data science or whatever it is.
Yeah. So this makes me think of a interview that I heard yesterday with Mark Cuban, the Dallas Mavericks owner. Yeah. He said that when he bought the Mavericks and he went down to start running the organization, he realized that I had to convince people that we weren't selling basketball. Everybody kept telling me, you're selling tickets and you're selling basketball, and basketball is the attraction. That's the whole point. And he said, you're wrong. This isn't about basketball. This is about people's experience of basketball.
Absolutely.
And sometimes I think, not to get too odd, but I mean, one of the things that maybe that we're selling is this idea of building a trusted relationship with people. And that's what they really are going to get out of it, is that they have built everybody's trying to build a network of people that if they need a software developer, that they know somebody they could trust, right?
Right.
And
You've got a friend in the software development.
there you go, right? But everybody wants that experience of having a network of people they trust versus having the experience that we're talking about with our marketing companies, which is, well, I'm going to give you my money. I don't know if I know you that well, but
it's got to start somewhere,
right? But that does make me go back to thinking about if you think about relationships, whether professional or personal, and you think about how long it took to build trust with somebody, trust isn't something that's built very quickly.
Well, it depends. I mean, I've had people that trusted us right off the bat. And it makes you work really hard to keep that trust. But I think there's, some people have been burnt.
Mm-hmm.
I used to, in fact, I did a little bit of work for a guy that used to come to 1 Million Cups a lot. The name was Rudy, something or another. But he had been burnt. And this was kind of his shtick, I found out later. He would go and talk to a lot of people and see if he can get them to help him with his software. I've been burnt before. I'm not going to pay. I can't pay that much. I mean, I get it. But you can't do much with that antagonistic type of approach.
Right.
I have to protect myself from you type of relationship.
I guess what I was getting at, though, was that by our own estimation, to find a software development project, assume that all of our sales machine is working correctly. It's going to take anywhere, by most estimates, for service level businesses, anywhere between 6 to 9 months to find a project, from the beginning of your sales process to the sign.
I see what you're saying.
Right. So I'm going to have to use that period of time to build trust, because most people, and we, like you're saying, we have had people that have, in a very brief period of time, come to trust us very quickly and sign to move forward with us. Right.
Right.
But I think that in a case where you are, just imagining the sales process and all the points along that process where you have an opportunity to build trust, right? And that's so that by the time they get to making a decision to move forward with you, they already trust you.
Right.
Right. And
I totally agree. I mean, because when I said, people trust you right off the bat, they do trust you. They trust you to be cordial.
Right.
They trust you to, I don't know, to turn on your video on Zoom, I guess.
Right.
But they may not trust you to write you a $100,000 check.
Right.
So that's what you're saying. Is you've got to not only get them to where they trust you as a person, but they need to trust you as a company, and they need to trust that you will be able to deliver on their investment. So
and right now, to go back to our marketing folks that we've hired,
I
right.
I will tell you, I trust that we will not lose very much money.
Here's a very important observation. So we hired, in the last 2 weeks, we've hired Chatmetrics, Explode Social Media, and Classer Marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And if I were to ask you which one of those you trust,
probably Classer.
Right, which is surprising that you answered that way, because I would have thought you would have said Chatmetrics.
I absolutely trust Chatmetrics, but they're easier. It doesn't require as much of a leap. Right. That's like, whoa, that's a no-brainer.
Right. But Terry did give you that feeling, right? That of like, this guy seems
he's
pretty
genuine. Yeah, he's authentic. Right. And I didn't even realize he was the CEO until I'd already decided to go with him.
Right. Yeah.
Like, wow, this guy is just really humble.
Again, I've said that I told this story in one of the earlier podcasts. One of the greatest things that being involved in this industry that has taught me is the way that developers look at the world, right? That developers look at the world by saying, I have to constantly be learning my craft, or else it'll pass me by, right? And I've always been at whatever thing that I was wanting to learn about. I've always been a person who's always constantly wanting to learning to get educated, learning to get better, right? And I think that the point that I'm trying to make is it's important that people understand when we look at this marketing experience that we're looking at it to learn from them, right? To learn to say, pick up from people like Call Metrics and learn how can we get better. Looking at other companies and saying, yeah, we don't want them to have that experience, right? Because I do think that there are a lot of small businesses that do build their process, build the way that they're going to do things, and then that's kind of it.
What I found with Terry and Chat Metrics was it was frictionless, and I expect customer service to follow suit, right? Whenever we have an issue, and so far it has been, right? Mm-hmm. We've reached out a couple times to their representative, and she's quick, she's on it, and she even engaged somebody else to help out when I told her I think I had that installed right. So I dig that. What I like about Classer is that he's persistent and he is, he's real. Mm-hmm. Right? He's also the only one that's in this country, and that makes me question my own motives, right? Why is it I trust him so automatically? Mm-hmm. Well, there's other people in this country that I didn't, right? That I know, not even meeting with you because you were late. So I haven't completely figured that out. But I will say this, the reason that I chose him wasn't just because I trusted him that he would do what he said, but it was because his cost was in a range that I thought was, well, that's a risk I'm willing to take. It's kind of like when you get ready to go to the casino, if you have ever done that, you take some cash, and I don't know, if you're wise, you think, I'm going to lose all that.
Right.
So how much do you take, right? And I wasn't willing to take that $25,000 bite, even though I think those guys would knock it out of the park.
Sure.
Maybe a year from now, when I've got a couple $100,000 marketing budget, maybe I'll spend 25.
But there is something to be said, though, for a lot. To go back to the RSI days for me. A lot of what I found, a lot of the earlier clients that we had, whether they didn't realize it at the time, was what you were paying for was, we're paying for David to build his own business and get really good at it. Right. Because there's a lot of stuff that he's trying out, right, on our
dime,
right, and to a certain degree that's respectable, that's understandable, but
as long as he's willing to be flexible with us, I'm willing to be flexible with him. So.
Right, and so you just have to kind of, I look at him and his company, and it's him and 3 or 4 people, right, and so I understand, he's done some work, had some success, probably doesn't have a big long resume of clients, but so you kind of know what it is when you're going into it, right? And I think some people are more more inclined to. I've seen this in a lot of interactions that we've had, where we're not a giant software development company. We don't have a lot of layers, and people can more easily relate to us sometimes because we're smaller, I think.
I don't know. Maybe, I hope you're right.
Yeah.
Because I think small business is the only way to really, it's easier for small businesses to stay intimately engaged with their clients.
That's what I mean.
Than bigger businesses. Yeah. So they probably like us on that front. Right. But I have seen plenty of tenseness on our prospective clients' parts because of our size, because we're so small, and they don't know if we have the resources to really pull off a big project.
Right.
Which we've done several times now. So, we'll get there. I'm not.
Right. Yeah.
I don't want to get a $5 billion government contract. I don't think we'd be ready for it.
Right.
But give me a $5 million one.
Sure.
We'll knock it out of the park.
Sure.
One thing that I think I really do want to improve on, and back to my experience, what I've learned over the last few weeks dealing with these multitude of marketing companies, is that we don't have a frictionless process. We don't have the documentation. We don't have the things built and available to us currently so that our clients experience frictionless engagement with us.
Right.
And I think we should start looking at it completely step out of our positions, step into the shoes of a client and engage our company from the outside, right? Do a Google search, see if you find us.
Right.
Go to our website, see if it talks to you directly, right?
Right.
Talk to our new chat metrics person.
There you go.
Right. But just engage us from the outside in and see if it's what we would want to purchase.
Right.
Because I think I'm kind of a stickler for judging vendors. I want to be able to be judged and pass the test. I guess that's where I'm going with it.
Right. The best example that I can give is again going back to the service level at RSI. A lot of our clients, we provided legal technology to law firms, and a lot of our service was expensive.
Ours is too.
And the reason why it was expensive was because Bob knew what his reputation and his industry wanted it to be, and his reputation was it was a Cadillac, as he used to call it. Cadillac level service. It was a white glove. It was an executive level service, right? So we were dealing with all these, really important, powerful attorneys, and we wanted them to think that what they were purchasing was this really, really, really expensive, solid service, right? And so we built our pricing that way. Our pricing was very expensive, but it built in within the pricing was a level of service that was very high. And so it was so apparent when we did not meet that level of service. And it's just a simple example was everybody was assigned an analyst, and the analyst was assigned to an attorney and to a law firm. And they ran that account basically. And Bob was notoriously super responsive anytime a client would email him. I mean, day or night, he was always just, on top of it. But like a lot of small businesses, he didn't do a good job of teaching that to people. You had to be with Bob to really get that that's what it was. But oftentimes we would fail at it. And so I can remember very specifically one instance where he had come down to our floor, and it was, 7:00 at night, and walked by one of the analysts' desk and said, what are you working on? He's like, well, I just got an email from, Julie at this law firm, and I'm pretty tired. I'm going to respond to her tomorrow.
Said that to Bob.
Yeah. And Bob said, no, I think you should probably respond tonight. And they kind of got the hint and said, you're right. I probably should respond tonight. But that was the expectation, was that, and again, he didn't do a good job. He did a good job of teaching when you were with him, but he didn't organizational wide. He knew what good service was, but he could never really delineate it. Right. And we have the same thing, right? Where our expectation is that when a client emails us about a particular thing, being responsive is a sign of a good service. Right. It's not the only
quickly responsive.
Right. It's not the only thing. Quality of the work is another side, obviously, which is important. The ability to have ongoing good relationships with them is important to a good service, right? Everybody wants to be known for something, right? Whether it's a service or a product. And so I think kind of what you're saying is what is it that we want to be known for, right? And what is that? What is it that makes us distinguished amongst our industry, right? And it's my belief, Dan, quite frankly, that, and one of the reasons why we agree on this is that there are a lot of good software development companies out there that do really good work. But if you ask them if they provide really good service, they'd say, well, not really. I mean, the work they do is really good, but service from a service model perspective,
Well, I agree with most of what you said, except for I don't know that it's really. I think if you do what you believe is the best and the right thing to do, that you shouldn't worry about what you're going to become known for. Right. And if I'm worried about becoming known for it, now my focus is off of just providing really good service for the sake of providing really good service.
Right.
I mean, I think that's what we need to do. So,
well,
something that you brought up a couple times today about the cost of your service, and it was built in this white glove service. And,
right.
And I really think that we should consider what it costs us to provide this hour of development time or PM time or whatever, and possibly change our pricing model to reflect the true cost of all of the things that we do to provide that value.
Which just struck me and reminded me of our conversation with Steve Stava, Twisted Pair.
Yeah.
And where we were having a discussion about time and materials versus value.
Right.
Yeah. And moving in that direction, you know, and to clarify, I mean, what I mean by known for is it's not like we sit down and me and you go, what are we going to be known for?
Let's get famous.
Right. It's in the execution. If you execute well enough, then you become known for it. Right. So,
right.
But yeah, I mean, you know, to your point, if I was to step outside of the company and journey my way through the sales process and think of the question, I think becomes if you envision yourself at the end of that journey, the question becomes, I paid Dan this much money and Illumisoft this much money. This is what I got for it. Do I feel like I got value?
Right. How do I feel?
Right.
Right. How they feel at the end is everything.
Right. And right now, I think what you're saying is that there's a lot of moments of friction from the beginning of that process to the end of it, that by the time they get to the end of it, we're uncertain.
I believe there is, but of course I haven't actually walked that walk. I think it's a worthwhile exercise. I know we can do a lot better.
Right.
And I know that we are investing right now in lead generation so that we can make sure we have more projects to do so that we can stay in business and invest in, more lead generation, but also in, in bettering our customer service. There is a way of building relationships with somebody that we should document and hand to them and guide them, give them a book, if you will, of exactly the journey that we hope to take them on so that they can know in advance where we're going, but also so that they can call us out when we vary from it. If we say, this is your customer experience, this is what we hope it is, and it isn't, then at least they can call our attention to it.
Right.
Whereas right now, our clients, I have to imagine, and this is probably the first time I'm imagining how they actually feel when they're engaged with us in the middle of a project and they have not received the result yet, which is an inevitable experience that they will have, right? Because we have to build it. And why we're building it, they paid us some money. And why they paid us and we're building it, we have not produced the result. So it has to be rather unnerving.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and you combine that with the stigma attached with technology companies in the first place, right? Which is
used car salesman-ish?
No. What I mean by that is that I'm imagining like conversations we've had with non-technical people about wanting to do a project with them, and they enter it in with this built-in stigma about, well, I'm going to go pay this guy, and I don't even know what he's going to go build for me, but and I don't even know if I'm going to get out of it what I'm paying him for, right? It's that negative stereotype that people have.
Well, it's complicated. Yeah. I mean, how do you help them absorb that so that they feel better?
Right.
I would love to find a way. I haven't yet, but I mean, let's keep working at it.
Right.
And with that, we have that's two hours and 8 minutes.
Oh, there you go.
Our video ran out about 10 minutes ago.
Interestingly, that one.
Yeah, it's out. There was a red light on the top of it. And since I started them within seconds of each other, I'm sure that they've finished.
Yeah.
So
All right.
With that said, I've enjoyed the conversation, Matt. It was in depth, and I think we got to some pretty clarifying thoughts around, what we're doing as far as a company, but also what we hope to do with our clients.
Yes, I think the title of this episode is going to be Frictionless.
That's become my favorite word
right.
since talking with Terry Wilson of Chatmetrics.
Yeah, I think there's a book out there written by.
Yeah, I'm sure there is. It's not. I did not coin the term or even bring it into today's vernacular. But I certainly want to build a business that for our clients is easy and delightful. Right, I've been saying that all along. I want it to be delightful, but delightful all the way through it, and especially at the end of it.
Right. Definitely.
All right. Well, we'll see you all next week.
All right.
Or you'll see us or hear us.
Right.
All right. Bye now.